If I asked you what the worst weapon in Dark Souls is, chances are you'd say something like the whip or cestus, maybe the straight sword hilt if you're taking the or the sniper crossbow. Personally, my guess was the Hammer of Vamos, and having just finished a run with it, it's honestly a very average weapon. Obviously, none of those weapons are particularly good, and the straight sword hilt and the Hammer of Vamos would leave you without a paddle in a second or third cycle, but there are only 2 weapons so far that have given me a genuinely hard time in the first cycle. One of them was the Dragon Bone Fist, but I honestly feel as though I simply didn't give that one the chance it deserved, and can't imagine it would be even half as bad as the straight sword hilt. The other, though, is the subject of this video. The rarest weapon in the game, by far, dropped by 2 respawning enemies at an abysmal 1% chance, is also the worst weapon in the game, by far. If it dropped from enemies that didn't respawn, the chance would accumulate and it wouldn't be nearly as rare, but because they respawn, you can only grind for it. The enemies are really far away from any bonfire to boot. The closest is still at least a minute run, and the other is surrounded by the other kind of ghost, making it hardly worth it. It's not even required for the Knight's Honor achievement, so I'd honestly doubt the vast majority of players have even gotten one, and most probably don't even know it exists, the ones who do only knowing it for its infamy. I actually ended up doing this run twice for a few reasons that I'll get to later. The first time, I hacked it in at the beginning so I could fight the Asylum Demon with it, and didn't want to grind for it, which is actually one of the reasons I wanted to redo the run. Now, the weapon actually isn't bad early on for a couple of reasons. It scales terribly, a whole 16 extra damage at the strength soft cap, and it doesn't scale with dexterity, but that does at least mean its damage is front-loaded. It's also a dagger, so it has the extra crit bonus, making it useful for anything you can parry. It's also fast, so the Asylum Demon is too slow to even really be a challenge, especially because it's weak to slash damage. Unfortunately, it doesn't have bleed buildup, but it really doesn't need it. Now, to actually get the weapon. I wanted to maximize my item find chance, and the only way we can really do that, at least without the symbol of avarice, is the Gold Serpent Ring and 10 humanity. 10 humanity is pretty easy, there's humanity scattered everywhere, especially with a little bit of duping. The Gold Serpent Ring is in Sens though, so we need to make our way there without fighting any bosses to maximize our time with the Ghostblade. On the way there, I grabbed the Grass Crest Shield, since this run is about the weapon in the best case scenario. I did everything I could with this run to give the weapon the best chance possible. Actually, I didn't grab the Chloranthy Ring, but I don't know if it would have made a big difference anyway. I also farmed for one of each of the 3 kinds of moss from the Demonic Foliage, since I can trade it for some Twinkling Titanite later. This probably would have been easier if I had gotten the weapon first, but either way, I did eventually get the moss I needed. I also got the Twinkling Titanite from the Crystal Lizard, obviously. Now, normally, you'd need to beat the Gargoyles and Quelaag to get into Sen's Fortress, but there's a way in without needing to fight either. All you need to do is lure a hollow onto the stairs here, parry it in this spot, use some terrible controls to navigate down into Sen's, and quit out. While I'm running to get the ring, I'll explain what just happened. When you parry the hollow in the right spot, you hit the death cam trigger, the thing that makes the camera go above you when you fall off the nearby ledge, without actually dying. The game stops loading things at this point because, well, normally you'd be dead in this state. Ground collision is constant, but objects, like the gate into Sens, don't load, so you can just waltz right in. Quitting out corrects the game out of the death cam state and things load properly again. If you're concerned about the run not being legit or whatever, I made sure the glitches I used specifically did not make the game easier. Quicker, a bit, since this was just grinding, but if anything, having a lower drop rate would make the game easier because I'd get more souls from killing the Banshee over and over. With ring in hand, with the ring achieved, I traded the moss for the Titanite and finally started trying to get the weapon. I grabbed a Jagged Ghostblade first, using the few curses nearby the start of New Londo and some fireballs, since I started as a pyromancer, to take out as many ghosts as I could. I got the Jagged Ghostblade pretty quickly, and it lets us attack the Banshee without having to use a curse every single time. I'm actually pretty excited to use the Jagged Ghostblade and have a fun idea for when I eventually do, but today is not that day. The route I devised to get to the Banshee that drops the Ghostblade as quickly as possible involves sprinting straight to it from Firelink, using the ladder shortcut, killing the nearby ghost, killing the Banshee, then jumping off the ledge so that my bloodstain with 10 humanity would be here and I didn't need to run all the way back to the bonfire. The grind still took an unreasonable amount of time, but I did get the Ghostblade and we can actually start the run proper. I do think that starting from the Valley of the Drake's bonfire would have been slightly quicker, but whatever, I have the weapon. Since I'm here in New Londo, I might as well drain it real quick. Getting through the ghost house is super easy to do hitless if you just run up to the top of it, past the rare ring of sacrifice, which will be useful for later, then drop down and go straight through the entrance right up the ladder. Ingrid actually uses the ghost blade, but I didn't cosplay him simply because I like my armor choice more. I think it looks better. I'm sure I'll eventually cosplay every NPC though. After draining the level, I went ahead and grabbed the red tearstone ring for later, and used the souls I got from the grind to upgrade the weapon to +4. The other titanite we need for a +5 will come later. I used the rest of the souls to get 20 endurance and vitality. I'm not worrying about hyper mode, frankly because I think that would just make the game harder, and I want to give the weapon the best shot possible. There's no way I'm doing Nito hitless with this thing. I will be using both the red tearstone ring and power within, but not in conjunction. I ran up into the parish to grab the key to the lower burg, and ran up to the gargoyles so I didn't have to worry about them later. Despite the weapon, well, being the worst in the game, a +4 against the gargoyles is still a nearly maxed out weapon against one of the earliest bosses in the game. Being a dagger also makes it very fast, which lets me obliterate the first gargoyle before the second attacks, and the second before it's able to retaliate. That wasn't the fastest gargoyles fight I've ever had, but it definitely wasn't the slowest. I decided it's probably best to max out endurance first, with the grass crush shield and all, and then vitality next. Leveling strength really isn't worth it for the abysmal scaling. I am two-handing the weapon, but that's just because I'll have enough stamina for the extra stamina consumption to not matter, and the extra 1.2 times motion value multiplier is extremely helpful. Now, the route from here is kind of unorthodox, but it ended up working out really smoothly. First, I dropped down here to get to the wolf ring quickly, jumped back over, and sprinted down into Havel's tower. The ring probably won't be super useful, all things considered, but the extra 3,000 souls is a nice little bonus, especially since the crit multiplier makes the fight pretty short. Half of the rest of the titanite we need for a +5 comes from this crystal lizard before the Taurus demon, and the Taurus demon itself is easy for the same reason the gargoyles were easy. An early boss with so little health goes down quickly to any upgraded weapon, especially with a plunging attack that takes out most of his health bar and a few extremely quick slashes from a dagger. Since I grabbed the key earlier, I can head straight down into the lower burg from here. The wolf ring kinda makes the whole area a joke. Nothing here does much poise damage, and some simple kiting, or even just being good at dodging, removes any threat the dogs and thieves might have had. Actually, the same thing goes for the Capra demon. The wolf ring makes this fight one of the easiest in the game. I think that's part of why I like Dark Souls so much. It's really hard when you have no idea what you're doing, but the moment you explore and find some solutions to problems you might be having with whatever challenge you're struggling with, you find an answer that trivializes it. Hell, even with this weapon, all it took were a couple dodges to beat Capra. I didn't even use the stairs. The speed of the weapon makes it viable and quite fun to keep up the aggression too. I don't need anything at all in the depths, so I just jumped over the railing and down through the hole behind the butcher's table. Gaping barely takes any damage from the weapon, meaning this fight will probably be a lot longer than most gaping dragon fights I've done. I didn't take out the channeler, obviously, but going to the opposite side of the arena makes it unload anyway, so it wasn't an issue. As long as you understand how unreasonably large the shockwave on the stomping attack is, and take advantage of every head slam and charge, especially the opener, gaping goes down quickly and easily to pretty much any weapon, including this one. Longer than most fights I've had with it, but still pretty quick. Blighttown is a pretty short level if you know what you're doing. You can jump down to the Iaito platform and then straight to the bonfire, then run past the fire dogs, made easier with the wolf ring, then drop straight down to the wall hugger from there. The length of the weapon, combined with the abysmal damage per hit, made taking out the wall hugger a chore, but I did eventually take it down and grab power within. From there, you can run into the nearby cave, drop past the whip, then drop down a couple more ladders and be at the bottom of Blighttown in a flash. I figured I'd try out RTSR against Quelaag, just to see what the damage is like, and the poison made it pretty easy. The damage isn't unreasonable for this point at all, especially with the speed of the weapon. It's not incredible, especially considering RTSR, but it's definitely serviceable. Ceaseless is, well, ceaseless, and we can move on. Real quick, I'm going to take out Stray and grab the doll before I forget. The Stray demon is weak to slashing damage, but the damage, even with power within, is unfortunately low. Luckily, you get plenty of attack opportunities though, and this fight still goes by pretty quickly. Shockingly, the stand behind it and spam attack strategy works just fine with pretty much any weapon you throw at the thing. Also, the gold hem set makes the torch hollows shockingly non-threatening, especially with the wolf ring. I don't know why I've never considered this before. You've already seen me go through most of Sen's earlier, and the rest isn't really anything special. I decided to run up past the boulder this time, quitting out halfway up the stairs to make sure none of them hit me, and just kinda ran past everything else. The Iron Golem is extremely resistant to slashing damage, and the moveset of the dagger makes it really annoying to hit the ankles, but you can knock him over. Unfortunately, I didn't end up knocking him off the edge, but I got plenty of time to attack, especially after using Power Within halfway through the fight, and was able to take him down pretty easy, if not quickly. The Grass Crush shield makes stamina management a thing of the past, even when Power Within isn't active, so that extra stamina recovery boost makes it incredibly easy to mindlessly spam actions. The Rafters and Anor Londo offered even less resistance than normal, shockingly, likely down to pure luck, honestly. I decided to go for Gwendolyn immediately, this time not for Sunlight Blade since this weapon can't be buffed. Honestly, I just wanted to get the fight out of the way, and my Fashion Souls requires the brass armor. The fight took 5 cycles, which is way more than normal and pretty unfortunate, but it was eventually over. I would struggle to find a way to make Gwendolyn difficult beyond impatience. Since we're here, the Painted World is right nearby and we can do that too. Sprinting through here is probably easier than Sen's most of the time, especially when you skip the dragon completely by just dropping onto the tiny ledge. Running to Priscilla isn't an issue as long as you kill the archers, who can admittedly be really annoying sometimes. Speaking of annoying, breaking Priscilla's poise is what makes her visible again. Daggers don't exactly have great poise break potential. Even with Power Within, I was doing so little damage and attacking so infrequently because the reach of the dagger makes it so much harder to hit her, especially when she's invisible. Of course, as soon as I got her to be visible, she basically immediately went invisible again, and I ended up dying because of that. She didn't go invisible a second time when I came back, luckily, so I was able to take her out pretty easily, but it was still really annoying. I usually use the Silver Knight Archer to see what the damage on a weapon is like. If I can one-shot the knight with a riposte, the weapon is decent and can probably get me through the game pretty easily. Granted, that doesn't really work with daggers because of the crit modifier, but it still gives a good confidence boost. Except I couldn't one-shot this guy with a Ghost Blade, even with the crit boost and the two-handed riposte. That doesn't bode well, but isn't necessarily detrimental. Getting the weapon to +5 by buying some Titanite from the Giant Blacksmith and doing that little damage to Ornstein, however, is detrimental. The speed of the weapon is really helpful here, but doesn't help me be less greedy, leading to my inevitable demise to Ornstein in the first phase. It took a few attempts, but I was eventually able to get through the fight, even using RTSR on most of Ornstein's health bar and Super Smough, thanks to the speed of the weapon and the absurd amount of stamina I have. RTSR gives the Ghost Blade half decent damage, but it's still abysmally low, all things considered. I almost forgot about Moonlight Butterfly completely. The amount of health I have at this point means she isn't a threat at all, obviously. I was even able to almost one-cycle her. I just forgot to use Power Within earlier than I did, so I had to wait for her to land a second time. Anyway, the Hydra's up next, according to my normal playthrough order, so I might as well go do that real quick. Even with Power Within, it takes 3 hits to chop off a head, meaning I had to cut off all 7 heads. The last one was a bit of a pain, considering daggers are so short, but I was able to bait the last head a little closer thanks to the rock outcropping over to the right. The Golden Golem goes down really quickly too, thanks to the attack speed and RTSR. I actually bought the Crest of Artorias here instead of just climbing the ladder, simply because I didn't want to enter the fight in RTSR range because of the chip damage from her toes when she jumps away. Sif has really long attacks despite being so jumpy, leaving plenty of time to get in a bunch of attacks, but there was no getting around the fact that she was going to limp due to how low the damage of the weapon was. I was a bit worried about the 4 kings going into it, given they're generally considered a DPS test, so I went straight in with RTSR, not worrying about Power Within. The first king went down with several seconds to spare, and the second grabbed me. I quit out since I was still in RTSR range and didn't actually die. The first king this time immediately opened with a tracking magic, so I just quit out again. The range on the Ghost Blade is a little bit terrible, but once you get past that and make sure you're positioned correctly, the weapon is fast enough to easily take down each king before the next spawns, assuming they don't spam magic attacks. The damage is pretty terrible, especially considering you have to be in RTSR range the whole time for decent damage, but at least I only had to deal with 1 king at a time. Keeping the aggression up was pretty crucial to that though. Technically, I did beat the king's first try, since I didn't end up dying at all. I placed the Lord Vessel with Koth and decided to go to the Duke's Archives next so I don't forget the Broken Talisman. The Firekeeper attacks me since we killed Gwendolyn, but a couple parries take care of her easily. Normally, I'd take the time to defeat the second boar so I could rest at the bonfire just in case, but that genuinely just wouldn't be worth it. Risking it all, and by it all I mean a short run past the pores again, I continued through the archives. The Crystal Hollows took 2 entire backstabs, or a backstab and 3 swings, which is honestly kind of absurd. I expected 1 backstab to be enough considering the crit modifier. The Hornet Ring probably would have been enough to kill them in 1, but I genuinely just forgot about it. The Crystal Golem wasn't really a threat thanks to our quick attack speed and its slow attack speed, but it did take quite a few attacks despite that. Since learning the trick where you run around the top of the ghost house in New Londo, I've used the Rare Ring of Sacrifice here every time, since I always do New Londo first. The Pasakas, the best thing to come out of Dark Souls, only take a single backstab to dispatch. 1 backstab is a lot easier to do than multiple swings, which means way more backstabs than normal on the Pasakas. I made sure to let 1 penetrate me as well for fun. I also learned you can jump up on top of the gears in the middle of the tower here too. If I ever make a follow-up on my Unremarkable and Odd Places in Dark Souls 1 video, this will definitely be on there. Speaking of that, actually, I made a Demon Souls version of that video, and the algorithm simply didn't show it to anyone for whatever reason, so if you're interested and didn't know, that is a thing that exists. Also, I'm working on a Dark Souls 3 version of that video in the same vein, so if you have any ideas, please mention them in my community post I made about it. I want as many places as I can get for that video. Anyway, we run up the tower, spin the stairs, run down the cave, and meet Seath. I decided to use Power Within at first, just to get rid of the clam that found its way into the arena, and waited for it to wear off. It's super easy to get into RTSR range using the crystals Seath spits everywhere, giving us somewhat decent damage to get through this slog of a fight slightly quicker. I think Seath will always be my least favorite boss in this game, just because of how boring the fight is, regardless of how much damage you do. I finally upgraded my Estus Flask at the Fair Lady, since I forgot Lautrec and don't want to have to deal with him and his cronies with this weapon just to revive Anastasia. The worm was a little annoying to deal with, since I usually attack it from just out of its attack range, but once I got in and just was aggressive with it, it went down pretty quick. The Demon Fire Sage was no different from Stray, even if he was a little bit jumpier. It still ended up being a pretty short, pretty easy fight. Centipede could be described similarly with one exception. Cutting the arm off in the first place is really annoying with such a short range weapon. If you stand in the corner to the right of the entrance, he'll approach the starting platform, then a couple attacks later he'll be in a spot where it should be relatively easy to cut off the arm. From there, just equip the ring and you can be as aggressive as you want to be. I haven't really seen anyone else do this, but you can get through most of Lost Izalith much quicker by just running under this bounding demon. From there, it's a straight shot to the secret bonfire. The Bed of Chaos wasn't any different from normal with this weapon. Just run to the right, break the thing, quit out, run to the left, make the jump, time your dodge, break the thing, quit out, hide behind the tree for the scythe stabs, dodge the 2 swings, and jump to the middle. This works every time and is shockingly consistent. Once you figure out the strategy, it feels like a puzzle that you weren't told is a puzzle, and that's my favorite kind of boss in a game. Bed of Chaos doesn't do that motif perfectly. Part of my strategy is abusing game mechanics after all, but I do like her despite her reputation. The Catacombs, oh, never mind, they're over. Pinwheel honestly doesn't really stand a chance with any upgraded weapon, as long as you can take him out before he spawns the 8 clones or whatever in the second phase. It's kind of impossible for him to be hard. The weapon attacks more than fast enough to be able to do that, even without Power Within or the red tear stoning. Nito, on the other hand, is the hardest boss in the base game in this run, by far, as he tends to be with most low damage and low health runs. I actually got a weapon at risk message my first time entering the fight. That happens pretty rarely, but it makes sense here since all the fights have been comprised of way more individual attacks than most weapons. There's honestly not much to say about the fight itself, just be careful of the skeletons, try to get Nito to take them out for you, and take advantage of Nito's weird hitboxes. The challenge comes entirely from the skeletons, and that's the main reason why I didn't use hyper mode. I'd rather not be one-shot by such a fast enemy. As long as you can avoid them sufficiently, it's really easy to stay really aggressive with Nito and end the fight before too long. I only ended up using 4 humanity to heal after all. The way I know this weapon has astoundingly low damage is because the Sanctuary Guardian fight took more than 30 seconds. With Power Within, I'm only dealing about 70 damage per hit. For reference, the Sanctuary Guardian has just over 2500 health, which is extremely low for the DLC. I'm happy to do a long Sanctuary Guardian fight. This is my favorite boss in the series, but this is genuinely surprising that the weapon is this bad. Eventually, RTSR kicked in and I started doing almost 200 damage a hit, but that was after most of the fight. Anyway, I'm gonna let the rest of this fight play out real quick, because I love this boss and I'm proud of this hitless fight that I did. There's not much to say about sprinting past all the enemies up to Artorias, so... Artorias is partially the reason I didn't make this video for over 9 months. I spent probably 2 hours fighting Artorias cumulatively over the course of those months. I'd occasionally open up the file, give it an attempt or two, and then not think about the run for another couple months because I just didn't want to deal with the fight. Eventually, I decided to just lock in. I was going to keep trying that day until I finally beat him and finished this run that had been a blight on my limited character slots for months, and beat him first try on that day. I ended up finishing that run, but decided to redo the whole thing because I recorded the rest of it on my laptop, which is significantly weaker than my desktop, and ended up redoing Artorias and the rest of the run anyway, both because I just wanted to finish the run to make myself feel good that I could beat the game with what I'm pretty sure is the worst weapon, but also because in the footage from the first run, I still had the part of my mod that makes the orange charred ring in the Covenant of Artorias active, and I wanted the entirety of this run to be unmodded since it's focused almost entirely on being difficult, even though that mod didn't actually change the difficulty at all. Anyway, I had to beat Artorias completely hitless, aside from one hit from the Pocket Abyss because I'm bad at the game, over the course of 5 minutes. The first run, I actually did the fight hitless, but that was technically modded. It's pretty easy as long as you don't play super aggressively, but the speed of the weapon does allow you to be pretty aggressive entirely safely, so the fight doesn't last too terribly long. I honestly think the fight would have been harder if I hadn't used the red tearstone ring, just because I don't think I would have been able to stay focused for that long. The Mimic with the Crest Key goes down pretty easily, but not as easily as most weapons, since most weapons can easily defeat it before it even stands up fully. This time, it actually used 2 entire attacks before it went down. The section immediately after, just before the prisoner, is probably the hardest part of the entire DLC that isn't a boss, just because there are so many enemies here. I decided to just run past and got extremely lucky with that working on my first try. I had to beat Manus hitless, basically exactly the same as Artorias, especially because I got grazed by the Darkstorm attack, so it wasn't technically hitless just like the Pocket Abyss. But I find Manus to be a much easier fight. Learning him was my least favorite part of the entire game, even more than Seath. Now that I know him though, I think he's really fun to fight hitless, especially once you learn how to dodge all 3 of the dark attacks. The ring gives you a ton of time to retaliate, and it's entirely safe to get in a hit or two with almost every single one of his attacks, especially with a weapon this fast. He is really fast though, so you still don't get to do too much damage too quickly. Luckily, he doesn't have a ton of health and went down faster than Artorias. Unlike Kalameet, of course, who has the most health of any boss in the entire game. He is much slower than Manus, meaning every attack of his gives us a lot more damage, but it does not equal out by any means. This fight took me 2 minutes longer than Artorias. Granted, some of that was playing it safe and not taking advantage of every single attack opportunity, but there was a lot of that with Manus too. He just has an absurd amount of health, even with the red tearstone ring for the entire fight. He's not too difficult to do hitless. Most of his attacks can be easily dodged by just rolling backwards, like the neck swipes, the tinnitus, whatever. The standing fire breath is super easy to punish by just running forward, and the 3 other fire breath attacks that he does on the ground also allow for counterattacks, especially if you're able to dodge the charge into the fire breath. The flying fire breath is easy to dodge, and it's extremely easy to bait out the tail slam after a glide attack, allowing for a ton of damage super easily. The only thing that made this fight actually difficult, aside from the length of it, is him moving weirdly against walls during the glide or charge. As long as you stay away from walls though, this fight is pretty easy as long as you can stay focused for the whole thing. I beat Gwyn first try in both runs, since this is a dagger and I had the Hornet Ring. I even forgot to use Power Within the second time. I mean, it's Gwyn, I had a crit modifier. I just parried a couple times, so... It's really nice to finally have this run off my chest after so long. I have a few more runs I've had planned for a very long time and want to try and finally finish up. I will eventually do all of them, but if you're still here and interested, I'd love to know what run you'd be most interested in. Between a soul level -83 at New Game Plus 6, Straight Sword Hill only at soul level 1, consumables only, and a crossbow only run. Or something else completely if you have any suggestions. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I love you all, and I would especially like to thank Lamb Astasol, Lilith the Hammer Witch, Validit, Nick Possum, Krista, Howling Nocturne, Ryasune21, Rakuna, White Flame, Manarok, and Ryan Rickard. And Aora, who I just noticed got a membership as I'm finishing up editing this. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. I don't know how to end this.